Hello, everybody. So I'm here again with another interview. Been working towards a new book on parenting tips for success for your child. And today I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Wise here. He's a good friend of mine, and I'm excited to ask him some questions. So thank you again, Mr. Wise, or Dr. Wise, for taking some time out of your day and helping me out with these interviews. The first question I have for you is, what do you think is the most important skill kids should learn in school today for their future?
Well, I mean, there's definitely lots of skills that a child can learn in school. I would probably say one of the biggest things they can learn is communication. Communication is one of those things that I'm noticing with the newer generations. They're just not learning fully. But communication is essential. When you start looking at communication, it's a meaningful interaction between two people. It's working on trying to express your viewpoint towards another viewpoint. It's working on trying to just really get as much information across in a very clear, concise manner. And with communication, it is one of those things that I feel is essential, that it's a life skill everyone needs to develop. And in this day and age, we're not seeing a lot of interpersonal communications. It's like things are stepping up and things are going more towards like a social media type of platform,
Yes,
to where you have kids communicating with other kids through a phone, through Facebook, through LinkedIn, through other social media platforms. You even have parents and kids texting each other when they're in the same house, just rooms apart, and where it's an evolution of communication. I think we're losing the personal communication that's in there. And, I feel that, schools are a big thing to work on trying to teach that, but it's also, parents, it's peers that should also continue the process of trying to teach communication.
Yes, sir. That's a great answer. Yeah, I agree with with so much social media nowadays, it does seem like kids are starting to lose a lot of one-on-one personal skills. So what skill from school do you use most in your current job?
I mean, there's lots of skills, same thing, from communication, time management, money management, collaboration, learning from failure is a big one, leadership. I would probably have to go back to communication, to where as a doctor, I communicate all day, every day. I have to understand patients coming into my office. I have to understand their complaints. But most importantly, I have to be able to educate, to those patients based upon what's going on with their body, and how we can help create something so that way they can overcome their health challenges.
Yes, sir. What skills do you look for if you're looking to hire an employee?
Oh, that's a good question. Definitely communication is one of them. Positive attitude. I can't express positive attitude. Teamwork, self-management, willingness to learn are all huge things. Critical thinking. There's so many times that I'll get somebody coming in for an interview, and not only being a doctor, but before I was a doctor, I was a general manager, I was a regional trainer. So I interviewed lots of potential managers. I've interviewed lots of entry-level, positions. And I always ask, it's a very, very simple critical thinking question. And the people who can give me a phenomenal answer are placed higher up on the tier versus someone who just gives me the I don't know answer. I want people who can think. I want people who can adapt, someone that's resilient in there. And that probably leads into another good one is I want somebody that is resilient. When you look at resiliency, it's along the lines of adapting to stress, adapting to trauma, adversity, being able to bounce back up once, they get knocked down.
Yes, sir. Yes. Okay. So the schools obviously they do a great job educating our kids, but obviously they can't teach them everything. What is one of the most important skills you see that kids are not learning in school?
I would probably break that down to two different concepts. You've got resiliency, but also learning from failure. And I think a lot of that goes hand in hand. It's one of those things that, as mentioned, resiliency, it's that bouncing back up when you get knocked down. And I've had a fellowship in pediatrics for many, many years. So I take care of lots of kids. I take care of lots of young adults now. And I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a lot of negative things are happening, but I'm not seeing these kids bounce back up. I'm not seeing them get up. I'm seeing it more as a woe is me. I'm unlucky. I can't move on because this happened, as a very, very good example. Had a patient that came in as a young adult, started taking care of him when he was like 17 or 18, goes into the military, gets injured in the military. Okay. And ultimately he is, horrible pain. We're talking about 8 to 10 out of a 10 type of pain level. And he feels like he can't function, and he feels like he's crippled for the rest of his life. And some of that mindset was given to him by medical doctors, within the military that told him, I says, oh my God, you've got a disc issue. You're going to have this disc issue for the rest of your life. It's going to get worse. And eventually you're going to have back surgery. And if we don't do back surgery, eventually you're going to be paralyzed. Okay. Well, that really threw a big negative mindset into the person. They weren't resilient. They weren't able to overcome that type of physical, chemical, and emotional trauma. So it led their life until he came back into my office. And then at that standpoint, I'm pulling up his MRIs. And I pull up another MRI. And when we pulled up both MRIs, we compared the two. And he looks at his MRI, which I didn't tell him it was his MRI at the first. Yeah. And he's telling me, oh, that doesn't look bad. That looks decent compared to this MRI. And this MRI, is a lot. Okay. You got lots of disc issues. You got lots of problems that's in there. And ultimately, he said that this person is going to need surgery. Yeah. And he thought that this MRI was his. And I looked at him. I says, no, this MRI is not yours. This MRI is yours. This MRI is a triathlon person that is physically competing this weekend. He's running, he's swimming, he's cycling, he's living his life, and his spine is worse than yours. Okay. So he looks at that and he actually gets very angry. Okay. To the point that he was not angry at me. He was angry at himself. He was angry at the medical doctors for telling him that he couldn't live his life, even though he had some level of a disc issue. Okay. I mean, this was a person that went to Navy SEAL training, became a Navy SEAL, and got injured shortly afterwards. Okay. So needless to say, took him through the rest of the exam process, adjusted him, and seen him like a couple of weeks later. And a couple of weeks later, I asked him how he's doing. He says his pain level dropped down to 2 out of 10, and he's back running. He just got done running a 20-mile run. Wow. Okay. Wow. So it's that mindset. And where some people, they need a very powerful, dominant figure to help push them forward so they can create that resiliency again to bounce back up.
My next question I've been asking everybody is graduate of college, so I don't think we need to go into that one because we can kind of skip it because it's obvious. Do you recommend college for all kids?
I do. I do recommend college for all kids. When you start looking at society, there's very, very few adults that achieve phenomenal status without college. I mean, obviously, you could be an individual that fails out of high school, but you're this incredible tech genius and you can create some type of device that can ultimately make you very successful. You can create a website that can make you very, very successful. But for the majority of the public, when you start looking into the very, very successful people in society, they usually have some aspect of a college degree. And I do recommend college, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, whether you're getting your master's, or if you're going on to get your doctorate. I mean, with me, obviously becoming a doctor myself, I've had many, many years of college. Matter of fact, 23 years of college to be exact, from kindergarten going all the way up till my last year. And even as a doctor, I still have to constantly go back and take continuing education. So with me, I'm a student for life. But 4-year undergrad, 4-year doctorate is what it took for me to get myself to where I am today.
All right. What is the most important skill you contribute to your success?
I would probably have to say, resiliency is probably a big one for me. A lot of hard work, a lot of dedication. Okay. It was one of those things that my life, I've had lots of adversity growing up. I come from ultimately a broken home to where my mother and my father divorced relatively early on. My mother moved away across the country. I ended up living with my father. It wasn't a great living dynamic, per se. But then, a lot of my friends, was going down the wrong path. A lot of junior high was not necessarily a great place for me. And I recognize that if I continue to stay here, I would not achieve my goals. I would not become the doctor that I am today, because I wanted to become a doctor ever since I was 5. Okay. So it was something that I molded. I worked on trying to help, create that reality for myself. And in junior high school, I knew that if I continued to live with my father and be around a lot of negative trauma, negative emotional trauma, where I was currently living at the time, I wouldn't achieve that. So in junior high school, I took it upon myself to move out of my father's house, finish up junior high school with my grandmother. Then I moved hundreds of miles away to go live with my aunt, who was a very successful attorney in LA. And in essence, she became a mother-like figure to me. And, that was probably a big initial thing that I knew I had to do to succeed and to move forward, so absolutely, I would definitely say that, with that concept, resiliency and being knocked down many, many times, but ultimately having the determination to get back up and to keep moving forward was probably one of the biggest things or skill set that helped me get to where I am today.
And then my last question for you is, who is the most important influence you credit for your success?
Well, that's tough. It's definitely tough, because I don't know if I can put just one person. Okay. When you look at probably a good, important role model, was my aunt for taking me in. Of everything that was going on in her life, she didn't have to. But she also knew that if she didn't take me in, I probably wouldn't help achieve a lot of the goals that I have. I've had lots of very influential teachers in high school. I definitely had some influential teachers, in my undergrad and my doctorate. First 2 years of my doctorate, like most college kids, we did lots of partying, lots of drinking, and, my grades weren't doing that great. But then the one person who actually really probably turned me around in college, was probably Tony Robbins. Okay. To where one of my buddies, knew that I was in a down part. Once again, it goes back to, that life stress being thrown on you. And, he knew I needed some inspiration to help bring my resiliency back so I could overcome it. So he handed me Tony Robbins' audio cassette called Get the Edge. And in that, Tony completely shifted and changed my perspective. And I was able to overcome a lot of the negative, events that was happening in the first couple of years of college based upon, friends and peer pressure and everything else. And it recentered my focus, to where I went through, finished up at UC Irvine, got a bachelor's, almost double majored. That was in there. I was missing one class, but I felt instead of taking that class, it was more important to me to jump onto my doctorate.
Mhm.
So went straight on with my doctorate, and really now I'm here.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much for your time. Parents, I hope you enjoyed the interview. I definitely know there's a lot of great tips in there. Take your time, watch it 1 or 2, 3 times, and take notes on it. There's definitely a lot of tips that can help your child's success in the future. And again, thank you, Dr. Wise, for your time.
Thank you very much.